I'm Sarah Bird, delighted to be here. And this is my buddy, David Rice.
I'm David Rice. I'm here with Sarah Bird, my buddy of many years. And it's good to be here at Book Spring at the Blanton Elementary.
Yeah. I mean, especially at this weird historical moment that we find ourselves in. Out there, I feel like I'm with you. I feel accompanied, being with book lovers. I'm sure that's who we're talking to. I'm sure we're talking to book lovers. And that is people who know how important books are. They know that books are a lifeline, especially now when we need our imaginary friends and our imaginary worlds more than ever. And a little bit later on, I'm going to read something about how I discovered my own imaginary worlds and imaginary friends.
Yes, I love that. You're so magical.
Real?
No, yes.
I'm not David Rice. I'm not David Rice.
No, that was good, Sarah. That was good.
No.
So it's funny. I'm rereading Joyce right now, James Joyce, The Dubliners, I
You
read
win.
Well, it's short stories. But I'm reading some material, rereading, and I watch a lot of TV, of course, like everyone did, movies and sitcoms and series, and then go, hey, I got to quit watching TV and start reading again. Right? It's been enough TV for a couple of months, and then back into the books. And it's cliche, right, to say it's a lifeline and it's imaginary, but it's true. It really is. Books, short stories, novels, they really do. As writers, you just can't write all the time. You got to be also reading.
Gotta fill up the tank.
Right. No,
words go out. Words have to come in.
Yes. No, this is true. It's true. And so we're here at the Book Spring and here at Blanton Elementary, and so they invited us to come talk, Andrea and Emily, of the organization, and so they said, yeah, Sarah Bird, and I said, yeah, man, I'm down with Sarah Bird. Let's do this. And so I said, well, when did I first meet Sarah Bird?
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I thought about this, and I met you first. I didn't meet you. I saw you give a talk at Barnes and Noble over at
Arboretum?
Yes, Arboretum.
Oh, man.
So I heard about you in the Chronicle and around town from other writers, and you're going to give a talk on your latest novel. So I went from South Austin to North Austin.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was good. And I sat there and I got to watch you talk, and people were very happy, and you're really joyful and jumping around. It was great. And I thought, cool. And then
cool, she's on drugs.
Yeah, no, I did. Because you'll see writers and they take themselves too seriously or like very stern.
That's not you, boy.
Well, that wasn't you. That's not you either. So you're very playful and talking to the audience, talking about stories. And then a year later, through Mary Margaret Farabee, the late Mary Margaret Farabee.
Beloved.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. They had the Texas Book Festival.
Right. Yeah.
And they had this program, I think, I can't remember what they titled it, but it's about reaching out to young writers or young readers.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Okay, this is like all coming back to me now. So Crockett High School.
That's right, Crockett High School.
And,
the Manchac Public Library.
Thank you for the nice things you said about me, but at that time, that was the first time I'd ever spoken to a young audience. And I had no clue about how to do it. So, it's the middle of the day, early in the morning, last thing on earth.
It was 11 in the morning. Early in the morning, Sarah, it was 11.
Like I'm saying, crack o' dawn, and these high school kids could give, a rat's ass about this old-time writer, and I go lumbering in, and, and I start like, okay, well, and David just like explodes because nobody's paying attention to me. I'm not reaching out. David comes out and he goes, all right, you all, listen up. This is Sarah Bird. She gets $1,000 to leave her house. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I did say that.
And man, they were like, what? $1,000? Maybe I should be listening to
it's about 11 o'clock.
Yeah, well. And I was just like, that was phenomenal. So talk about magic, boy. You brought it. You always bring it.
Well, we give a talk at the Manchac Public Library. And I say that because I was an employee of the Austin Public Library for 4 years. I was a clerk. So I'm a big library fan.
Yeah.
And so it was you and I and a professor from UT, really nice guy, he'll come to me later. And we met these high school kids, part of this program. And it was great because these high school kids had not met any authors, I don't think.
No,
Yeah. And they didn't know what to ask or quote how to behave. I'm not sure if that's a term, like, you know, you're watching writers.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I don't. But it was a really great event because these students had not reached out to authors, and this is part of this whole concept of like Book Spring, like how do, when you're a kid or a high school kid, even a college student, and you meet authors and you get to hear them talk about what they do in their process and their ideas and views, it's neat because you might watch someone cook in the kitchen or bake a cake, but you're part of that. You're listening. But when you're watching writers, you're not really part of that because they're writing somewhere else, right?
Absolutely.
And then the cake comes out, but how is that cake made? You know?
Yeah, and honestly, kind of one of the best things I could have done for these kids was to show up and be a schlub, and they could go, if she can do it, and the world opens up. You think I can do it? So I grew up in a military family, and as little as kids saw writers back at that time, I never saw anyone who wasn't in a uniform, so it wasn't even part of my life. But what I'm curious about, David, is speaking about books as a lifeline. And I mean, I don't think it's a cliche. That's so absolutely true for me. But I'm wondering, do you recall your first book experience, the first encounter you had with a book that made you a reader?
That's a good question. It's something I don't talk about often. But when I was a kid, my grandfather, who was David Rice, he's a Mexican-American. This guy was a white guy. And he noticed that I had dyslexia at like the age of like 5. So grandfather, like 5 or 6, grandfather noticed that I had problems reading, right? I get the words backwards. So he tells my parents, and he hires a tutor. So the tutor comes in, this young white person, this is like a college kid. This is forever ago. I'm an old guy. It's forever ago. And she came to Ed Couch, Texas, where I was born and raised. And for a whole summer, read me a book about popcorn. It was a farmer who had a barn, and he had all this corn, and it got really hot, and the popcorn popped everywhere, and he fed the whole town off the popcorn.
Oh my God, you remember that book?
Well, you see, that goes back to you're saying about the Lifeline. So let's say you're a kid and you have 20 books or 10 books on your shelf, and just one of those calls to you and sparks the imagination, right? Of popcorn and the barn and the tractor and the farm. Yeah. So from there, I was with this woman, and she would teach me how to read. But it was that, I think she picked out other books probably that weren't working, but that book
clicked
because I liked popcorn, right? And I liked the idea, and I understood a farmer, I understood corn, because I was raised in a rural town, there was a lot of fields. So I could identify with that story. So I think that the idea of not just having books on your shelf or in your house, but do you have the right books?
Absolutely.
And if that book, clicks, and I remember when I went to your reading, because you were weren't your father in the Army?
Air Force.
Air Force. Okay, so, and there was folks in there whose parents were military, and they're military brats, and so they identified, right? Uniforms, people walk around,
isn't that important?
Rank, and they respect our troops, which is very important. So that was very evident in your writing and in your talk, all right? So that formed your adolescence. So having the right book on the shelf is, it's important.
If I might segue, will you grant me a segue?
Yeah, it's your segue.
That is exactly what my first book experience was about, and I ended up writing about it in the book you're talking about, Yokota Officers Club. And so this, it was, my first book was The Wizard of Oz. That was the one that just brought me into the world.
You read that?
My mother read it to me.
Wow,
my mother read it to me. Yeah. But the situation, it was so, peculiar, but also so incredibly relevant to this moment right now, because I was on board a steamship going to Japan. We'd been transferred to, my father, an Air Force officer, had been transferred to Yokota Air Base. So I was on this steamship, and at first it was just fun and games and shuffleboard and eating ice cream parfaits. And then we left San Francisco Bay, got out of the calm waters. And from that instant forward, my stomach was just like a trampoline. I was throwing up constantly and had to be, essentially be quarantined. I was locked down in the cabin, in this tiny little cabin, which was this metal enclosure, no window, and right next to my head were the steam boilers. So they were like thumping all the time. And my mother, so I had a brother and a sister, and she was trying to take care of them. So she would come in occasionally and, like crush up Dramamine for me with sugar and, give me sips of flat 7-Up. But the incredible thing, she read the book, and this is so important. She had this book in her possession, and it was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. She started reading that book, and going, oh my God, a story about a girl who was plucked up out of the safe place that she loved. And the other reason I was not a great military kid, aside from seasickness, was I was scared of change and strangers and new places and new people. And I was not happy to be ripped up from the safe place. And so just like Dorothy, I was ripped up and got whirled around, a stomach churning experience, and then plopped down in a strange world full of strange full of strange people. And man, if you don't think I can relate to that book, it was like having your fortune read. It was like having, the best psychologist in the world look into your head, and, a girl going to a new world, and she doesn't want to be there. All she wants to do is go home. Oh, hell yes, I related. And I just had to find out what was going on. But it was that book and that moment that, the metal walls just disappeared, and it was like I had this huge, vast, panoramic view of worlds I could roam. And most of all, I wasn't alone anymore. And so that, I cannot emphasize, that changed my life. And I think of all the kids that Book Spring is helping, putting, like what you're talking about, the right book into their hands.
Right, but that's a great story. That has a lot to do with also for the adult, right? The grown-up, who's going to introduce a story to a young person.
Absolutely.
To say, look, this is the right book at the right time for you. Mm-hmm. This is what you're going through. You're Dorothy right now on this boat to Japan, right? So I think that not only is it important to have the books on the shelf, right? But if you're an adult and you look at some books mm-hmm. and say, oh, my kid's going through this, my kid's really into bicycles or flying kites or likes to swim, this book's about a swimmer, this is going to call to them. And so not only do you have to have the right book,
yeah.
but at the right time.
The right book at the right time.
And if you do it, then it becomes, okay, so that happened. I'm 56 years old. This whole popcorn thing happened, 51 years ago? And it's still holding on. And your story,
Absolutely.
So it's amazing
Absolutely.
when the story is told at the right time that it can leave a positive imprint and then make you a better adult.
Yeah, and it gives a kid so much strength. This idea, it's like the world opens up. You go, there are other people out there who have these same feelings. You're not alone anymore. And I can't emphasize how colossal that is, how colossal it was for me. And also, having this model of a girl who's going through the same thing I went through, and my age, and she has trials, she struggles, she's tested, and she wins. She wins, David. and so that to me is like, it just gave me hope. And that's also, the right book at the right time, man. That's just hope between pages.
It's how do you, because there's no formula for that. You can't tell a grown-up or a parent or a guardian, this is the book for this child. That's why books need a conversation. Like a lot of times when I work with high school kids or middle school mm-hmm. kids, and we're going to look at a book or a short story or a poem, we have to give some backstory.
Yeah,
Why is this important? Our backstory is 17 years of friendship, right? Through the Texas Book Festival, through friends that have passed on, current friends.
That time I saw you at that concert, the Cold Sweats,
Did you like that?
not too long ago.
That's right.
Not
Good.
too long
Yeah,
ago.
It's good memory.
No, it was so fun. I was like, David Rice.
Well,
the man with the beautiful.
this town is, we're fortunate because Austin is still a small city, and a lot of people still here care about community, care about nonprofits and education
True.
and the arts, and so a lot of the old guard has shifted, but hopefully the new guard coming in.
Oh man, they're coming on strong.
Yeah,
they are coming on strong.
we'll do what's necessary. So,
But back to your point about the right book, that's why I think like what Book Spring does is so vital, because they kind of worked out the algorithm for the right book at the right time generally, and then they have these selection. But I think also the most important thing about the right book is the book you have in your house, the book you own, the book you can keep, and it's there. And that was, obviously from my story, changed my life, that my mother had that book in a place there was no libraries or no bookstores. So, yeah.
But she, that's the other thing too. I mean, Wizard of Oz, it's a great book, big book, right? I mean, what is it, 300 pages, something like that? So you look, that's a lot of pages. As a short story writer, I'm like, what? First of all, how long is this book? Forget it. Where are the pictures? So I think that, so as writers, as, quote, artists and people who care about the city they live in, what do we do to ensure that this organization and others that support the arts, how do they tap in, right? How do we find the adult, the guardian? Did they come to us? Do we go to them? I mean, this services a 100-mile radius around Austin, which is a great radius. A lot of towns, Cedar Park, San Marcos, Luling, Seguin, the list goes on, Hutto. So, because we know that there's a need for it. And we know, everyone knows that books matter. Right? They do.
No argument.
You can't deny it. And anyone who has books in their house is better for it.
Completely.
And then it's, heck, I've got, mechanic books. I work on my truck a lot, and I have mechanic books from Shilton, and I have a book there from 2002, and I'm looking at
places books can take you.
Yeah, so that to fix my truck, right? So,
fantastic.
So you need a book for the right time, the right place, but then also, who's going to share that book with you? Right? So that's also the human factor, right? There's the story, but then there's that human factor of the individual who says, that's why that movie Princess Bride does so well. It opens up with the storytelling.
Yes.
The grandfather
Yes.
telling the kid, and you said you were read too, and I was pretty much read too.
Yeah.
So it really is the responsibility often of the guardian, of the adult, of the grandparent, of the parent, to say, mijito, mijita, son, daughter, come, sit down. We're going to get this book together.
Yeah.
Just at least 2 pages, and then.
And not every family is equipped logistically or whatever or maybe they're worried about having a library card and talking about addresses and whatnot, and so maybe they're not going to the library, and so what a miracle to have books appear in your house. And
right.
then that, whatever that step is that needs to be taken, that's over with. You've got the books, and then.
Well, yes, we're here to promote the organization, but as writers, this is not a hobby to us. This is not like some thoughtful, kind thing. This is essential. We're not looking at this saying, well, this is just something you may want to try. No, we believe this is essential for every home to have some books. We're not saying it's going to save the family or save your life, but you know what? Why don't you try it? It's good to have the good book in your house and a bunch of other books, and it might help you. And in the time of need, you can't bake, but what do you know? We got a baking book.
Truck broken down. Let me help you out.
Here's a book.
Let me cook you up.
But going back to how we know each other through books, because when I saw you at Book People, and I saw the reaction, and then we talked at the high school together, I think it's important for people to realize that writers, playwrights, painters, musicians, these individuals, it's not a lot of. I think most of them are not in it for the accolades or the awards or recognition. It's what they have to do.
Yeah, there you go. Bingo.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
And it's so much fun, and it just has to be done. Like today, what we're doing, this is fun to me because we're having to talk about books.
And we're not wearing masks.
Well, because we're far, but we sprayed the room, so that was good.
And we're safely distanced.
Yeah.
But
we're
I'm
good.
with a human. I can see your mouth.
Yeah, it's good. We can see a smile.
I see a smile, David. I'm in heaven. This is a great time.
But it is. Well, it's a great time. But this is a good time. But yeah, so it's exciting to talk about books, and I just, I know that because I worked at the Austin Public Library for 4 years. Parents would come in and check out books with their kids. But as you mentioned earlier, sometimes you can't go to the library. Sometimes you don't have transportation. Sometimes you, for whatever reasons, your work schedule. But if you just have 20 books in your house,
bingo.
Yeah, and just enough to read, just enough to share, that will spark something, right?
Yeah,
so that matters.
And it was so important for me to grow up understanding the importance of books. So we had, as a military family, when we made these constant moves, we had a weight allowance. And so every item was carefully chosen and precious. And I will always be so grateful that my mom and dad took shelves of books wherever we went. We had shelves of books. And so just like you were talking about, I could, leaf through and decide, this is the book I want to read, how to explain sex to your to your child.
You just got to read that. I just learned on the fly. But so failed. So I should have read a book. Yeah, fix the truck and how to do this anyway. So but that goes back to the importance of books. If books aren't so important, then why do people burn them? Then why do dictators and people who are just horrible individuals burn books if they're not important?
Why does our current president pretend he hasn't read the book written about him?
Yeah, this can go on for days. This is a 30-minute show. Anyway, but yes. But I mean, if books aren't important, then why are people burning them? Why are they banning them? Why they limit access to them? That is how powerful books are. So people say, well, that's not important. Well, it's not? Then why do they put a stack of them and burn them? Why do you think they're doing that? Why are dictators and evil presidents and evil prime ministers or whatever burning books if they're not important?
No argument here, David.
I mean, yeah, but I'm like, then you know what? You should have 20 books in your house. You should have a library. You should start a collection. Talking about, how many books. I only have like 300, I counted them. I had like 370 books, not many, in my little library. So I have in the library and I had 370 books. And I purged them recently. I had to go on a trip and I had to take some books and I got rid of some, took them to Goodwill. And I was like,
I know, everyone.
This is a good book.
It's too emotional.
Really. And I had 3 copies of a book. I have 3 copies. Which copy should I keep? They're all so good.
Yeah,
like the font on this one, and this one smells better.
What is the book you have 3 copies of?
I had a book of The Hobbits.
Perfect.
I had the collection of the trilogies in those little packets.
That's a foundational
book. And I'm like, which ones do I get rid of? And then I had War of the Worlds, and then I also had 1984 from college and high school. How you get when you're a kid.
Oh.
And then
these are the greats.
Yeah, and so then I thought, okay, which ones do I get rid of? And anyway, it came down to like 372, something like that. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. Kind of the books I thought, was that enough to sustain me? I thought, well, yeah, I've gotten this far with 372 books. I've gotten,
Not bad.
Yeah, I got
not bad.
I thought, and I've read almost all of them. So I thought, okay, I think maybe that's all you need is 370 books to get you somewhere.
Well, sometimes I wonder if I would even have had a career if it hadn't been for Dorothy Gale and The Wizard of Oz, because, getting ready to have this conversation, I was thinking about it, and I realized every single book I've written is about a girl who has an adventure, who gets into a challenge, meets weird people, is in a strange situation. I mean, every single one.
Isn't that your life, though? It sounds like you just described your life.
David. Here I am now talking.
A strange situation, which reminds me. Now we're going to segue. I'll use a segue For that thing
Permission
you wrote.
granted.
You wrote this thing. You wrote something.
Oh, no. It turned out I didn't need to.
You don't need to do that? What?
We've covered it, baby.
We did?
We totally
Oh,
covered
fantastic.
it.
Was it your manifesto?
Yeah. You just
All
brought
right,
it
I
out
wasn't
in
sure
me.
what you were up to. So what are your thoughts on that?
I sort of worked my way through it. I had this initial, high level of resistance to the digital world because it wasn't entirely great for writers. But I have sort of, divided into two worlds, and if I'm doing research, it's going to be digital almost always, unless it is something that's out of print and I need to go get it buy it or whatever. Fiction, I can read fiction, but I think it's like you have muscle memory of when you physically read a book. At least I do. And that I can remember things much, much better when I read a book. Like I'll remember the page, I'll remember which side it's on, and I can go back to it. And so, what everybody says, I became a Kindle reader because of traveling, and you can take 10 books with you, which, you couldn't pack before. But I'd say the even more kind of striking to me is print versus audio. And audio has kind of taken over my life in the sense that, I'm always listening to somebody tell me a story, constantly. That also, I absolutely cannot listen for information, and I can't listen to a mystery, you gotta put stuff together. But this was really brought home to me on my last novel, Daughter of a Queen. And I was allowed, fortunately, to pick the narrator. So I picked this wonderful woman who had read The Hate You Give, Angie Thomas's great novel. And she did the most spectacular job, to the point it was literally a different book. I'd listen to it and completely lose track of the fact that I'd written the book, that I knew what was going to happen. I was like, what's going to happen next? I'm on the edge of my seat. And people came up to me like, my brother, who never went to hold back any thoughts. He goes like, the audiobook was a lot better than the print book. I go like, okay, point taken.
Okay, so first of all, I've never read a book on digital.
My hero.
I don't have a Kindle. I don't read books on a laptop or an iPad or whatever. I don't. I always carry a book. Like I'll have a paperback.
Old school.
In my travel bag wherever I'm going. I usually grab a book from the shelf and reread a book. Like I'll say, read that again. I'll toss it in and reread the book.
That's beautiful.
It's fun. It's like the Dubliners. I'm rereading that, so here, read that again. So, but I noticed at schools, kids have the Kindle, right? And they have their laptops, their Chromebooks, and they're reading from there. So this goes back to what you said about the voice of the audiobook. So the teachers, I think, have a lot of control here, and so do the parents and the audio person reading the book to guide the reader. So if the kid's reading on Kindle or iPad or Chrome or the actual book itself, I'm all for it. That's fine. But I think it's good to have a guide about that story or about that novel, to talk about that story. So I'm not opposed to it being digital or print. I know there's textile and the feel and the smell of the book, and the list goes on, right? And the actual physical turning the page as opposed to pushing a button, which I'm not sure how that works. But
that is so adorable.
Right, but but what your brother said about it was better audio than it was print, right? Because as you know, if it's audio, that individual can pace the story, pause it, and it can be a different story.
Yeah.
And this is a little dangerous because that's not how I intended it to be. Like when I think about Mark Twain, hearing these guys read his work, and Mark Twain might say, that's not how I that's not how that's supposed to be read. There's supposed to be a pause there. It's supposed to be you're supposed to punctuate that word. That's supposed to be louder.
In my case with this book, it was an utter godsend because my character, and I do it first person, it's a very risky thing I did. I wrote an African American woman in the 19th century, first person. And the audiobook read by a black woman, I think it opened it up to audiences that would have been close to a white woman telling this story. So that I am extremely grateful, not just for her talents, but for allowing that access.
Well, there you go. I mean, the guide of the book, right? Your teacher, your parent, your guardian, the professor, whatever. That's important. So whether it's Kindle or digital or print, we can go on for days about that and this and that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, fine, okay,
Give
guys,
me the
done talking.
Dubliners.
I don't. Who's guiding this party, right? I mean, who's going to take us through these woods, up to the cliff so you can see the sunrise? Who's the guide? And that guide often can point out things on that trail that would go by the wayside if it wasn't for that astute guide, right? To say, oh, by the way, and check out this flower here. Notice that's about the flower. Why is that flower important? And so the digital or print, that's fine with me, man. I'm down with either one, whatever. But I think the narrator, or slash the guide, the teacher, the guardian, the parent, has a really good chance here to guide the reader. So when your mom read you Wizard of Oz, that was a really good moment
Exactly.
to guide you through this journey.
The way it is with a parent and a child. I mean, having a child sitting in your lap and your mother or father reading to you, there is nothing that feels more safe and secure and utterly transporting. So that had a huge influence in that case. That's a good point.
All I know is that's why a family has to get involved in reading. That's why someone in the family should help the child with a story. Somebody has to, so they can then bounce off of that, and that can build stronger bond. So digital or print, look, I don't care, lo que sea, fine, bueno. But I want someone there to be responsible to guide that young person through that story or through that novel or poem to get to that place. And it doesn't take a whole lot of work.
No.
But it's just that, say, let's do this together. I don't have any social media. Like I don't have Facebook. I just don't do that stuff. It's so much energy, and I don't do it. But a lot of my friends have blogs, right? And they blog whatever it is their day was, and I read blogs actually. And it is so brave. Because they're just putting it out there without an editor, without any guide to help them, hey, clean this up a little bit or tighten that sentence up or transition here, and they're just putting it out there. So I'm seeing, when I see young people text messaging or communicating with each other via blog or whatever, I'm inspired because that could very well be the seeds of a really great writer. And so I know that our generation may think, well, all these kids and their blogs and these millennials and the Z, whatever they're called, Zs, whatever. I'm like, I don't care, man, they're writing.
Completely the way I feel. And I feel that way that never in the history of mankind have people read so much. We are reading constantly,
yes.
Non-stop, constantly. And I think, just that ability to read, to be literate, becomes more and more valuable. I mean, the digital world did not minimize the printed word. It has exploded it. You have to be fluent. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to comprehend. You have to be able to respond. And like you said, people doing blogs. I just think everything in writing is so much more fluid than it used to be. The gatekeepers are gone. If you want to write, if you want to have people read, there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah,
nothing stopping you.
I like it. I mean, I like the fact that we have people walking around with cameras, making their own videos, making short films, making music videos, and writing blogs, creating 3-minute plays. It's creativity, man. I'm like, go ahead. I mean, as long as it's not hurting
I
anyone.
love what you're doing with your video presentations.
Well, that's Leonel Garza of El Paso. He's an actor, and he found my my flash fiction, and he said, "Hey, do you mind?" He started doing it. Then he
That's
yeah.
so interesting.
Then he called me after. And he goes, "Hey,
Is this cool?
is this all right with you?" And I'm like, so I checked it out. I was like, "Whoa." Now,
They're fabulous.
well, this goes back to what you said about books and the audio, and I said about Mark Twain. So when Leonel called me to want to do these flash fiction stories, which I'm in favor of because I like the idea, I was fortunate because he's Mexican American. He's from Chicago. He's been in the Valley where I grew up. And he was in Austin for 10 years, so we have a connection. And he does theater.
he's very good.
He's great. So Leonel and I talk about each story and what I think is important in the story. So Crazy Loco, one of my books of short stories, has an audiobook. And I've heard it. And I was like, and I heard it at school. I've never bought it, but I went to schools and they would play it for the kids as they would read along. And I would be like, no. And I look at the speaker, no, that's not, no.
I had that exact experience.
Yeah, I was like, no.
This last book is the only one I've listened to very much at all, and I was pretty much anti-audiobook because I listened to Dakota Officers Club, the first page, so very near and dear to my heart, this place where my family was stationed and I had such, formative years of my life, Dakota Officers Club. And the narrator, the first page, pronounces it Yokata.
Ah.
And so I was like, can't listen. It's done. I can't change it.
Well, there you
That's
go.
what it is. And then the next time I listened, aside from my last book, was Above the East China Sea, which also centers on a base where my family was stationed. Very, very, very important in my life. Kadena Air Base. Okay, so I'm like, let's see what happens here. And first page, the narrator pronounces it Kadena. So, I don't know how they did the rest of it, but that is like pretty important. Why didn't you ask me? I would have told you.
Yeah, that's where I think that the writer and the narrator should talk. So I told him, now listen, so I want to talk to you about this. This certain paragraph or this certain sentence is meant to be this. So when he reads those on that YouTube channel he started, that is, my approval stamp of approval.
Oh,
that's exactly how I want it read.
Writer? That's
so
fabulous.
That is how I would read it. That's how it's meant to be read. That's how it should be, accented or punctuated. So, to me, again, that goes back to the guide. If you're reading by yourself without someone who can guide you, through that jungle or forest or path or creek, wherever you're going, that guide can say, okay, what's that about? Why is Dorothy so afraid of that guy? Why does she want to help him? Because she has an uncle like that, right? So with the guide through the short story, then like, oh, I didn't say, yeah. And go, oh, that makes sense. So without a good narrator, which is the guide, right? The parent, the guardian, the grandparents, whatever, then you might get lost in that story and miss all the beauty in it, right?
Miss all the beauty.
Yeah, you won't hear all the sounds in it. So it's just a really, again, this is why it's so important that if you do have books in your house, you as the responsible adult, the grown-up in the house, should know what these books are, read a book with your kid, read it first perhaps, and then, like you said, your mom picked that book because you were going through this journey. So it's that kind of stuff. It takes a little bit of work, but the payoff, we don't know, but it's going to be amazing.
Changed my life.